Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Imagine waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to a phone call from 5,000 miles away. The voice on the other end tells you your mother has been rushed to the hospital. Your heart drops. Your first instinct is to book the next flight home. But then reality hits. You look at your bank account and there isn't enough for a ticket. Even worse, your visa status means if you leave right now, you might never be allowed back in. You are completely trapped. This is the heartbreaking reality for millions of people living abroad. How do you handle a family crisis when you physically cannot be there? In today's story, we're going to follow someone navigating this exact nightmare, how they managed the crisis, found unexpected support, and coped with the distance. As we listen to their journey, we will also learn some incredibly useful English vocabulary and expressions for describing difficult life situations, emergencies, and emotional challenges. Let's get started with Chapter 1. The silence of the apartment was absolute, broken only by the steady hum of the refrigerator. Marcus lay sound asleep, exhausted from a long week of balancing his job and the endless stress of waiting for his visa renewal. Then, at precisely 3:14 a.m., the darkness shattered. His phone vibrated violently against the wooden nightstand. Marcus groaned, fumbling in the dark. Seeing an international number on the screen instantly made his stomach drop. Nobody calls from 5,000 miles away at this hour with good news. "Hello?" Marcus whispered, his voice thick with sleep. "Are you Marcus? It's Aunt Clara," a frantic voice strained over a crackling connection. "It's your mother. She collapsed at home. The ambulance just took her to the general hospital. The doctors say it's her heart, Marcus. It's serious." The room seemed to spin. Marcus sat up straight, his heart hammering against his ribs. A cold sweat broke on his forehead. "Is she awake? Can I speak to her?" "No, she's unconscious," Clara said, stifling a sob. "You need to come home, Marcus. You need to get on a plane right now." The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at the glowing screen. A primitive instinct told him to grab his passport and run to the airport. But as he sat on the edge of his bed, the cold, hard weight of reality began to set in. He was trapped in a tiny apartment across the ocean, completely powerless. Marcus didn't go back to sleep. He sat at his small kitchen table with his laptop open, the screen illuminating the dark room. With shaking fingers, he opened his banking application to check his balance. The numbers on the screen were a stark reminder of his precarious financial situation. After paying rent and sending money home last week, he had less than $300 left in his account. He quickly opened a travel website to search for emergency flights. The prices for a next-day one-way ticket across the Atlantic were astronomical. It would cost over $2,000 just to get on a plane tomorrow morning. Marcus stared at the blinking cursor on his screen, feeling a heavy weight press down on his chest. He didn't have a credit card with a high enough limit to cover the cost. Even if he begged his landlord for a delay on next month's rent, it wouldn't be nearly enough. He opened a blank spreadsheet and began desperately calculating his options. Could he sell his laptop? Could he ask his supervisor for an advance on his next paycheck? Every mathematical equation ended in the same frustrating dead end. The financial barrier was a massive wall standing between him and his sick mother. He rested his head in his hands, listening to the distant sounds of early morning traffic outside. In the movies, people just pack a bag and rush to the airport without a second thought. But in real life, poverty acts as an anchor that keeps you firmly stuck in place. Marcus realized with agonizing clarity that love alone could not buy a plane ticket. If the financial barrier was a massive wall, the immigration system was a locked steel door. Marcus stood up from the table and walked over to his desk drawer. He pulled out a thick manila folder containing every document of his life abroad. He carefully spread the papers out under the dim desk lamp. There was his work authorization, his tax returns, and the crucial receipt for his pending visa renewal. Because of bureaucratic backlogs, his official visa had expired 6 months ago. He was currently legally present, but he was stuck in a dangerous immigration limbo. He opened a bookmarked forum on his phone where thousands of immigrants shared their experiences. He typed his question into the search bar, traveling abroad with a pending renewal receipt. The answers on the screen were terrifying and unanimous. If he left the country right now, his pending application would be automatically abandoned. He would be barred from returning, losing his job, his apartment, and his entire future in an instant. He would be locked out of the life he had spent 5 painful years building. Marcus felt a cold wave of anger mix with his deep sadness. He paid his taxes, followed every rule, and worked 60 hours a week. Yet, to the government database, he was just an abstract case number without a family or a beating heart. Going home meant destroying his career and sacrificing his ability to financially support his mother in the future. Staying here meant feeling like a coward who abandoned his mother in her darkest hour. He held the expired passport in his hands, feeling completely invisible to the world around him. By 7 a.m., the sun began to peek through the window blinds, but Marcus barely noticed. His phone buzzed again, this time with a text message from Aunt Clara. She had managed to get into the intensive care unit and was standing beside his mother's bed. Marcus immediately initiated a video call, his hands trembling as the screen connected. The video feed pixelated heavily before snapping into a blurry, unstable picture of the hospital room. Seeing his mother on the screen took his breath away. She looked incredibly frail, surrounded by monitors and connected to multiple plastic tubes. "Mom?" Marcus called out, his voice cracking with emotion. Her eyelids fluttered open slowly, and she turned her head toward the phone screen. A weak, tired smile appeared on her face when she recognized his voice. "Marcus, my boy," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the steady beep of the heart monitor. The poor connection delayed her words, making the 5,000-mile distance feel even more immense. Marcus wanted nothing more than to reach through the glass screen and hold her hand. Instead, he had to force a brave smile, swallowing his tears so he wouldn't scare her. "I'm right here, Mom," he said, leaning closer to the camera. "The doctors are going to take good care of you." They could only talk for a few minutes before the nurse gently told Clara that visitors had to leave. The screen went black, returning Marcus to the stark silence of his small apartment. The digital connection was a lifeline, but it was also a cruel reminder of his physical absence. He was completely dependent on a Wi-Fi signal to see if his mother would survive. With the video call ended, Marcus realized he couldn't afford to sit in paralyzing grief. If he couldn't be there physically, he had to become a remote project manager for his mother's crisis. He opened a new messaging group on his phone and added Aunt Clara, his childhood friend Lucas, and a trusted neighbor. He titled the group Mom's Recovery Updates
and began delegating tasks immediately. He asked Lucas to drive to the hospital during his lunch break to check for updates from the head doctor. He coordinated with the neighbor to ensure his mother's apartment was locked up and her plants were watered. Managing a medical emergency through text messages and voice notes was exhausting. Because of the 6-hour time zone difference, Marcus had to stay awake while his city slept to catch people during their active hours. He sat at his desk with a notepad, writing down medical jargon, medication names, and hospital visiting hours. Every time his phone buzzed, a sharp jolt of adrenaline shot through his body. He found himself constantly translating medical terms from his native language to look them up online. Aunt Clara was doing her best, but she was elderly and easily overwhelmed by the complex hospital system. Marcus had to act strong, giving clear, calm instructions while feeling completely broken inside. He organized a rotation schedule so someone would always be at the hospital during the allowed hours. He felt a deep sense of guilt for relying so heavily on the kindness of others back home. They were stepping up to do the job that he, as her only son, should have been doing. But this digital network of friends and family was his only way to fight for her life from across the ocean. He was thousands of miles away, but through his phone, he was directing the battle.
At 8:30 a.m., Marcus walked into his office building, his eyes bloodshot and his mind completely numb. He grabbed a cup of black coffee from the break room, trying to brace himself for an 8-hour shift. As he sat down at his cubicle, his coworker Sarah smiled and asked him about his weekend plans. Marcus forced a tight smile and made a casual comment about relaxing, hiding the absolute chaos in his heart. It felt surreal to watch his colleagues complain about minor inconveniences like broken printers and slow internet. To them, it was just another normal Monday morning, but to Marcus, the world was completely fracturing. He spent the morning staring at spreadsheets, but his fingers hovered over his phone every single second. He kept the device face up on his desk, his heart leaping into his throat every time the screen illuminated. During a team meeting, his manager asked him a direct question about a project deadline. Marcus froze for a second, his brain trying to bridge the gap between corporate data and his mother's heart rate. He answered smoothly enough, but the internal strain was becoming physically exhausting to maintain. He debated whether he should schedule a private meeting with his supervisor to explain the crisis. But a dark, practical voice in his head reminded him of his precarious position as an immigrant worker. If his company thought he was distracted or unable to focus, they might reconsider supporting his visa renewal. In this system, showing vulnerability felt like a luxury he simply could not afford. He went to the restroom during lunch, locked himself in a stall, and buried his face in his hands. He checked his messages, saw a brief text from Lucas saying things were stable, and let out a shaky breath. He washed his face with cold water, looked in the mirror, and put his professional mask back on. The isolation of carrying such a massive secret was a heavy, suffocating weight.
Marcus spent his evening commute researching immigration loopholes, refusing to give up hope. He discovered a term that felt like a lifeline: emergency advance parole. According to the government website, an immigrant could receive urgent travel permission under extreme humanitarian circumstances. The next morning, Marcus took a sudden personal day and arrived at the regional immigration office at 5 a.m. He stood in a freezing line outside the gray concrete building, clutching his manila folder tightly against his chest. When the doors finally opened, he was processed through security and given a plastic ticket with a number. He sat in a waiting room for 3 agonizing hours, watching the digital screen slowly call numbers ahead of him. When his number finally flashed, he walked up to a window separated by thick, bulletproof glass. The officer behind the glass looked exhausted, sorting through a massive stack of paperwork without looking up. Marcus explained his situation, his voice trembling as he presented the official hospital letter Aunt Clara had emailed him. He explained that his mother was in critical condition and that he needed an emergency travel document. The officer scanned the hospital letter, then opened Marcus's file on her computer screen. She clicked through a few tabs, her face remaining entirely expressionless as Marcus waited for her verdict. "I see your pending renewal application," she said flatly, finally looking at him. "But this hospital note isn't enough." "What do you mean?" Marcus asked, a wave of panic rising in his throat. "It says she is in the intensive care unit." "The regulations require proof that death is imminent for expedited processing," the officer replied coldly. "She has to be dying for me to see her?" Marcus whispered, his hand pressing against the glass. "Without that specific medical prognosis, I cannot approve an emergency appointment." She handed back his folder. Marcus walked out of the building into the bright daylight, feeling a profound, crushing sense of defeat. The bureaucratic system didn't care about love, duty, or a son's desperate need to hold his mother's hand. He was completely bound by cold, unyielding rules that saw his family's tragedy as nothing more than an insufficient document. Marcus sat on his living room floor, surrounded by the scattered documents of his rejected application. With the bureaucratic doors firmly shut, he knew he had to swallow his pride and try a different path. He couldn't fix his visa restriction, but he could at least try to remove the financial barrier for his mother's care. He opened a crowdfunding website on his laptop, his hands hovering over the keyboard as a deep sense of vulnerability washed over him. He had always been a private person, someone who preferred to handle his own problems without making a scene. But pride was a luxury he could no longer afford while his mother lay in a hospital bed 5,000 miles away. He began to write, pouring his heart onto the digital page, explaining his situation honestly and without pretense. He uploaded a picture of himself and his mother from his graduation day, the last time they had been in the same room. He explained that while he couldn't fly home due to legal restrictions, he needed help covering her mounting medical bills. With a trembling finger, he clicked the Publish button and shared the link on his personal social media accounts. Within an hour, his phone began to buzz with notifications that brought tears to his eyes. A former college classmate donated $50. A regular customer from his weekend job contributed $20. Even Sarah, the co-worker he had hidden his pain from the day before, left a generous donation and a supportive message. By midnight, the fund had reached over $1,200, providing a significant cushion for the hospital expenses. Marcus stared at the growing list of names, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude break through his isolation. He realized that even though he was physically separated from his homeland, he was not entirely alone in the world. People were willing to act as his hands and feet, stepping in to help bridge the massive gap across the ocean. The money wouldn't buy him a plane ticket, but it gave his mother a fighting chance at receiving the best care possible. For the first time in days, the heavy, suffocating pressure in his chest began to ease just a little bit. The following Thursday brought a heavy silence that felt different from the days before. Marcus sat at his kitchen table, staring blankly at his cold coffee, his phone resting right next to his hand. According to the schedule he organized, Aunt Clara and the doctor were meeting for a critical update at that very moment. Every minute felt like an eternity as he waited for the device to signal the verdict of his mother's latest tests. He found himself looking at the clock every 30 seconds, mentally tracking the afternoon hours in his hometown. When the phone finally vibrated, the sharp sound made him jump, and his hand shook as he swiped to answer. It was a video call from Aunt Clara, and Marcus braced himself for the worst, holding his breath in anticipation. The screen cleared to reveal Clara standing in the hospital corridor, but this time she wasn't wiping away tears. Instead, a tired but genuine smile broke across her face, instantly lifting a massive weight from Marcus's shoulders. "The crisis is past, Marcus," Clara said, her voice sounding clearer than it had all week. "Her heart rhythm has stabilized." She turned the camera toward the window of the intensive care room, showing his mother sitting up slightly in bed. She was still connected to a few monitors, but the color had returned to her face, and she was drinking water. Marcus let out a long, shaky breath that he felt he had been holding for an entire week. Tears of pure relief spilled over his cheeks, and he didn't even try to hide them or wipe them away. "The doctor says the new medication is working beautifully," Clara continued, smiling warmly at the screen. "She is out of danger." His mother looked toward the camera and waved weakly, her eyes shining with love and recognition across the distance. "I told you I wouldn't leave you yet, my boy," she whispered, her voice stronger than before. Marcus pressed his hand against his screen, wishing he could feel the warmth of her hand in return. He realized then that while the distance was still real, the absolute terror that had paralyzed him was finally gone. The worst of the storm had passed, and for the first time he could see a path forward.
3 weeks later, Marcus stood by his apartment window, watching the city streets fill with evening commuters. The chaotic panic that had defined his life for nearly a month had finally dissolved into a calm, steady routine. His mother was officially discharged from the hospital and was back resting comfortably in her own living room. Marcus unlocked his phone to initiate their now daily evening video call, no longer feeling a knot of dread in his stomach. The screen connected instantly, showing his mother sitting in her favorite armchair with a colorful blanket over her lap. She looked vibrant, her laughter echoing clearly through the small speaker of his phone across the vast ocean. They talked about her physical therapy, the meals the neighbors were bringing over, and the funny things Marcus saw at work. Marcus realized that while he couldn't physically cook her dinner or help her walk, his daily presence was still profoundly real. He had managed her care, raised the funds for her recovery, and kept a constant vigil from 5,000 miles away. The immigration system had kept his body trapped in one place, but it could not contain his love, his dedication, or his duty. He looked around his small apartment, no longer seeing it as a prison, but as a place where he was building a stable future. A future that would allow him to support his family even better, with a legal status that would eventually let him travel freely. He understood now that being a good son wasn't just measured by physical proximity, but by the emotional bridges you build. The distance between them was still exactly 5,000 miles, but the gap felt smaller than it ever had before. As his mother smiled and blew him a kiss through the screen, Marcus felt a deep, enduring sense of peace take root. He was exactly where he needed to be, fighting for their future, connected by a bond that no ocean could ever break.
Marcus couldn't change the laws of immigration, and he couldn't instantly change his bank account balance. But he showed us that when you can't be there physically, your love, your effort, and your voice can still bridge a 5,000-mile gap. Throughout Marcus's journey, we used some powerful English expressions to describe emotional resilience and difficult challenges. Words like profoundly, proximity, and enduring. If you want to review these words and practice using them, check out the description box below. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to support a loved one from far away? How did you handle the distance and the stress? Share your stories in the comments below. Let's practice our English and support each other by sharing our real-life experiences. If Marcus's story touched your heart today, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories and English lessons. Thank you so much for watching. Keep practicing, and I will see you in the next story. Goodbye.